For a series to be good, it needs a few quintessential things. A plot that gives you a reason to invest some time, interesting characters that are fleshed out and make you care about them, and typically subject matter that sends a good message or asks a compelling question. However, how do we turn a good story into a great one? Well, sit back and grab a snack because we here at Full Zero are about to give you our review of one of the greatest Netflix original shows that has ever hit the platform.
Our story starts off in Japan following a 2-bit con man by the name of Makoto Edamura. We watch him con unsuspecting people into cheap scams with his partner Kudo. Ed is charismatic, sharp as a tack, and full of potential. Ed and Kudo soon come across a Frenchman, Laurent, who becomes the duo's next mark. As soon as Laurent shows up, we get the feeling he may be a bit more savvy than the everyday Joe Blow. Right off the bat, you can tell Ed isn't fooling Laurent a bit, and that Laurent is playing the fool for some ulterior motive.
This leads us to Ed's call to action, so to speak. Turns out Laurent has taken Ed's wallet, and he's pretty pissed off about that, being pissed that he's conned by someone in general. He follows Laurent to a cab, and because of Ed's stubbornness, he then follows Laurent all the way to freaking LA. Once he's done toying with Ed's psyche, Laurent then tells Ed what his occupation is, a self-proclaimed confidence man. He and his merry band of thieves travel the world scamming assholes who, let's just face it, they totally deserve it, out of their money, power, and status. All while giving back to their victims and keeping just enough to stay comfortable in the meantime, of course. I mean, fucking Cynthia owns her own damn island. I mean, they're living cushy. Makoto is reluctantly interested in this and agrees to help them with their first case.
Now, explaining anything from this point would just be us explaining the entire show to you, and that's not what we're here to do. Suffice to say, Team Confidence is a group of Robin Hood adjacent people that steal from the rich and give to the poor and themselves. And by this point, you should be pretty well sucked in. I mean, who doesn't love a good heist movie / show / anything? And if you don't, that's probably because you're hard as fucking nails. Nothing excites you but the real thing. You have fun walking the walk while we keep talking about it, you badass motherfucker. In all seriousness, The Great Pretender has everything you want in a heist show. You've got sex, gambling, high-octane air races, and car chases, as well as well-thought-out characters, overly complicated plans that would make M. Night Shyamalan bust a fat nut, and elite-tier pacing that will have you comfortably enveloped in this show from start to finish. And while we're on the subject, part 2 is like a personal story, dude, like shit.
Now, when we talk about pacing, we're referring to the speed at which the story progresses or the speed in which the plot moves from beginning to middle to end. Pacing that goes too fast can make you feel like you're on a nice vacation and you've got to go back to the real world sometime way too soon, whereas slow pacing can feel like being stuck in traffic and trying desperately to get to your next destination. On first viewing, we had some reservations about the cases only being 5 to 6 episodes long, but our worries were quickly pushed aside as we quickly got enveloped with the environment that the writers portrayed. The Great Pretender succeeds in allowing you enough time to know your surroundings and to familiarize yourself with the characters on screen. Another point where a lot of shows seem to fail is overstaying their welcome. I'm sure you've seen a movie or a show that you thought took way too long to end. Maybe something like Return of the King or Tokyo Ghoul, anime only of course, don't shoot me.
A good example of a show knowing when to end would be like Samurai Champloo or Cowboy Bebop. The difference is that a show that knows when to end has a defined story it wants to tell, and knows the path that it wants to take to get there, whereas one that doesn't feels like they're just trying to milk a series for every dime they can squeeze out of an udder, which is dumb because cows don't have money in their teats. Again, The Great Pretender doesn't suffer from this at all. Each character has a grounded background which informs the decisions a character makes. Having a clear origin makes the roadmap to your destination so much easier to get to.
That's one of the major strengths of this show. It has an unbelievably masterful way of introducing characters in the most organic way possible. Just about every time a new character is introduced, we've already seen him in passing, like Shion Kim, Kudo, Abby, Laurent. Shion plays the part of a random housewife being scammed by Edamura. Kudo has been conning people with Edamura since Jump Street, and Laurent gets pickpocketed by Edamura. Oh, and Abby just happens to be at the penthouse of the main bad guy in the first case. They're all there to encounter alongside our main character who serves as the surrogate for the audience's eyes and ears while he is introduced to the cast alongside of us. Of course, every character is planted there for a reason, but as far as we can tell, they've been there the whole time. Because of this, we don't see the pace of the show slow down at all. We've all seen media that opens with a bang and then fizzles out toward the middle. The story stops to explain itself over like a boring dinner conversation or a long war room monologue, something like that, giving you enough action to keep you awake or until you're begging for the finale. The Great Pretender doesn't need to do this because it introduces its characters naturally. They don't need to dump exposition because the character's story and the plot are one. This keeps you from losing interest in a slow pace or feeling like you don't really have a connection with the characters with a fast pace.
Part 3, the characters.
Beautiful. Cynthia may not have a severely tragic background like our other families in Team Confidence, but hers is a compelling and very human story in its own right. Cynthia fell in love with a struggling artist, Thomas, who was shy, sensitive, but had an unmistakable fire for his work. As they struggle to stay financially afloat with her working in a coffee shop and him trying to make a living by selling his paintings, their relationship becomes strained. It turns out Thomas is fantastic at forging famous works of art and is contracted by some rich fucking snob, the 007 of the art world. You know, with a name like that guy's gotta be a prick. Thomas wanting to give Cynthia the world falls into doing something that he hates. Despite Cynthia telling him that material things didn't matter and the most important thing was his happiness, her pleas fell on deaf ears. He still felt like she deserved something more. And we could say more, but you should really just watch it yourself. This story is probably the most relatable one in the show because it's a struggle that most of us can relate to. Selling our souls to our corporate overlords for the sake of our loved ones and a better life.
Abby's had a hard lot, to say the very least. When she was a little girl, she was an up-and-coming ballerina. After leaving one of her recitals, Abby and her parents were caught in the middle of an airstrike, killing thousands, her parents included. Abby is then thrust into a life of war and tragedy, becoming a soldier fighting in the name of revenge against those who took everything from her. She fights until her entire regiment is mercilessly gunned down, leaving her with more painful emotional scars. Eventually she leaves this life and supplements her lack of feeling with extreme sports and death-defying stunts, all in an attempt to feel something, and more accurately, to die, a grandiose form of slow suicide. Abby eventually joins Team Confidence, doing what she's good at, being fearless. Everything changes when she meets one Makoto Edamura, who helps her see the value in living and, in effect, changing her perspective on life. Beauteous.
Laurent was always extremely intelligent. As a child, he studied day and night to make his mother proud and give her the life she absolutely deserved. It turned out, though, he had dyslexia and needed some special schooling to learn how to properly educate himself. His mother signed a contract to get her son the education he so desperately deserved, only to find out that it was a con and left her penniless. Laurent's mother tragically passed away from the stress of trying to provide for him. He then went from place to place, winning money from those who weren't as smart as he was, getting his ass kicked every once in a while. And eventually, he comes across the man that forced his mother into an early grave and plots to kill the bastard! However, when he goes to stab the man, a girl gets in the way. Laurent runs from the scene, only to find out that she's still alive. Her name is Dorothy, and she's a part of a group of people who con the wicked out of their money for the sake of their victims. Laurent then joins this team, putting all of his talents to the test, doing the Lord's work. Although they have rules to prevent them from getting attached, Laurent finds himself falling madly in love with Dorothy. Dorothy eventually gives in to Laurent, and they plan to retire and get married, but not before pulling off one more big scam. Let's just sum things up at this point by saying they don't go as smoothly as all that. Laurent's story pulled on my heartstrings a bit more than most. Maybe it's because he's the type of person in the show that always seems like he knows everything that's going on at every moment. Nothing ever gets him down, and he just doesn't fall in the dumps at all. But when you actually dig a little bit deeper into Laurent's story, you find out that he is just as human as every other character in the show, maybe even more so. And then you also find out that the rest of the story was pretty much devised by him, and you wouldn't have this show without Laurent masterminding the entire plan.
Now, Makoto is a bit easier to speak on, being that he's sort of us as the audience. Not to say that he's a one-dimensional character or anything, it's just that his motivations are easier to understand because we wear his shoes for most of the story. His upbringing was a good one for the most part, loving his mother and idolizing his father as a pillar of justice and a defender of the downtrodden. Although things would change when his dad is charged with child trafficking and abandons his family. His mother then falls ill, with treatments being extremely expensive. Makoto then resorts to conning people to pay for his mother's well-being. With his father gone, all the responsibility is left to him, making him resent the man wholeheartedly. Soon after this, his mother does unfortunately pass away, and with nothing left to lose but to keep putting one foot in front of the other, he keeps doing what he's good at, until he tries to con a Frenchman. Makoto is complex and feels deeply for his comrades. He rightly doesn't accept the no attachment policy that Team Confidence likes to spout so often. It makes him an ideal candidate to have as the surrogate for the audience. We feel this way towards the characters on screen, we feel his attachments, and we feel the need to care for them. And in turn, so does he. Makoto isn't perfect. He can be stubborn, quick-tempered, and naive. However, it all gives him shades of gray that make him well-rounded and more human. Beauteous.
We could go on and on about our heroes, but we'd be here until the eventual heat death of the universe, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So the big takeaway here was one common theme, and no, it's not making us cry like little newborn babes. It's making you fucking cry. We don't cry. We're fucking men. We're fucking men. We don't cry. We don't cry. You cry, bitch. But the theme of loss. Each character had something or someone close to them stripped away from them, so it only makes sense for them to steal in an attempt to get it back. They've all experienced immense hurt, so it only makes sense that they would try to put less hurt back in the world. It only makes sense that they would be drawn into this life and subsequently drawn together.
Part 4! The art style and presentation. I could describe the art style of this show as impressionist anime. To avoid a long, douchey art school explanation on impressionism, impressionism is taking something from real life and giving your impression on it. It's a form of abstract art that allows the painters to paint what they feel rather than what they see. The Water Lily series by Claude Monet is a perfect example of the style. These series of paintings don't give you an accurate representation of what water lilies in their natural habitat actually look like. Instead, you feel how Monet felt, fuck my ass with a knife, in painting them. These emotions run the gamut of joy, happiness, and warmth with the use of bright colors, to cooler tones and more detailed reflections in the water, which evoke calm feelings of self-reflection.
The Great Pretender screams impressionism. Daytime in LA is sun-bleached and vibrant, while the night is full of blooming neons. Cynthia's Island and Singapore look less like the genuine article and more like what those places could look like if they were made of, like, stained glass or something. Hell, the show is closer to an oil painting than the pen and paper look of most anime. Most of their water shots are closer, or near photocopies really, of some of Monet's work.
Now, outside of looking nice and bringing up feelings that you thought you couldn't feel anymore, why does the art matter? Well, that's because the show's art style helps to set up how you should view the show and to reinforce the themes. During our show, our band of heroes go through some pretty wackadoo shit. Abby has been blown up twice and can still flip through the air like she has an agreement with gravity and fight with the best of them. Laurent is able to pull off harebrained schemes and fake out deaths with less hitches than a one-horse town. In a more realistically depicted show, this might seem far-fetched or hard to believe. However, The Great Pretender isn't worried about what you think, it's appealing to how these scenes make you feel. Furthermore, the show uses art to edify character decisions and themes. The previous section detailed some of the horrendous events our characters had gone through. All of our heroes deal with the internal struggle of loss and the external struggle of the villains that they have to take down, but it's still depicted with vibrancy. Even when the show hits its lowest points in darker color palettes, and big spoiler alert here, like Abby's rooftop reflections on her past and subsequent attack on the man responsible for her parents' death, Laurent's descent into mourning after the death of his love, or Edamame's conversation with his father when he's finally given the truth about his place in all of the schemes over the years. They are never far from a beautiful vista or a strong source of light. In my opinion, this is the show telling us, even though the characters feel low, and you as the viewer probably do feel low too, life is still beautiful. There are still reasons to fight, and still reasons to have hope.
Okay, we're going to take this time to talk about some of our favorite parts of the show and some things that we maybe didn't like so much. The Great Pretender isn't perfect, but in our opinion, it's really not that far from it. So starting this off, can we just take a second to talk about all the clues and hints that the show drops right in front of us to let us know how the story is going to play out? Like Paula Dickens asking Makoto if he was the best con man in Japan, a line that only Laurent had ever heard him say. Or the intro showing us all of our mainstay characters before they were ever introduced, giving us hints on who was going to stay. Alright, and pretty much everything from here on out has huge spoilers, so...
And I mean huge!
Huge spoilers. Huge spoiler alert for you guys.
Big old fat floppy spoilers dropping down on your ass.
I mean, you know, you can call spoilers what you want, but I like to call them happy little spoilers.
Because it's like, oh, I got excited. Let me go see this show because that's an interesting twist.
You ever get excited and, you know, you gamble on a fart? Oops, I spoiled my pants.
Now they're ruined. But that means I get to buy new pants, and that's a happy day.
Well, spoilers aside, I do take issue with Dorothy being shown to be alive at the end of the show. Too many shows seem to chicken out when it comes to the death of a beloved character, and Dorothy's death was beautiful and tragic and ultimately perfect and synonymous with her character. And I can't help but feel like showing that she was still alive cheapens her death a lot. Although I can't help also feeling happy that she's still alive so her and Laurent can get that happy ending together, but I guess I'm a little mixed on the entire issue, to say the least. That's just me.
And one gripe I had with the show was the placement of Cynthia's art. I know we just spent the last 10 minutes talking about the excellence of the pacing and the story structure and all that shit, but it feels like Cynthia's story was an odd drop in tension. I'm not mad, because it felt like it was a conscious decision from the showrunners to break up the intensity of the show, especially after Abby's arc, which was pretty intense. I just feel like, shit, we just needed to ramp up the tension, especially going into the final arc of the series. And, okay, last thing, I promise. I would say the only other mark that I would have against this masterwork of a show, and once again, big spoiler warning, was the end of Edamura's arc. So in the end, Edamura finds out that Laurent had essentially played him the whole time. Everything that they had done was to make sure that he could avenge the child trafficking organization that killed Dorothy. And this dastardly scheme is all organized by none other than Edamura's father, the Wizard of the East. To make a long story short, Ed is deep undercover with this organization and is given the option to betray his comrades or to go along with the scheme. Now, it makes sense for Edamame to choose the side of his cronies, but I think it would be way more compelling if he turned. He went dark side. He went Darth Vader on that bitch. Taking the team's motto, if you screw up, you'll be left behind a heart, and siding with the villains, especially given that they are teasing another season with Dorothy, the person that they were supposed to avenge.
Because of these issues that we have with the show, we would give it an overall, a 9.8 out of 10 capsule toys.
Easily.
Good rating, right?
Excellent rating. There's very little that's wrong with the show. Like, these little gripes don't take away from the story at large. And I also like how we open saying, like, we're gonna talk about our favorite things and some things we didn't like, and then, like, ripped on it for, like, a couple minutes. But...
Well, I mean, we ripped on it for a couple minutes, but we pretty quick get right back to, oh, I love this show, let me just suck it off.
Oh, yeah, just wait for this wanker closer that we have. It's gonna really make you cream your jeans.
So with all of these points in mind, the Great Pretender has built a tiny stained glass island in our hearts. The reason for that is the show feels whole. Each aspect of the show serves to make another better. The pacing allows us to get invested without getting bored. That allows us to have a better understanding of the characters and what brings them together. And the art style contextualizes the characters and makes sense out of their decisions. All of this comes together to make a hyper-bingeable show from top to bottom that does not disappoint at all. To us here at Full Zero, this is how you take a good story and make it truly great.
And that's why God blessed Makoto Edamura and gave him the power to kill all that